Probably heard the story about a mother who called up to her son one Sunday morning. "Son, get up. It's time to go to church." The son yelled back, "Oh, Mom, I don't want to go to church. The people there make fun of me. Most of the people there don't like me. They don't listen to what I have to say. I'd rather stay home in bed." The mother said, "Son, you gotta go." And the son replied, "Well, give me 3 good reasons." Mother said, "Well, for one thing, you're a grown man. You're 42 years of age. 2, most people do like you. And 3, you're the pastor of the church." Probably at least 2 of us that understand that. Friends, sometimes it is hard to get motivated to do what you have to do. I wonder if our Lord felt that when he entered the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus knew what was coming, yet he was willing to go through with it. You know, I've read some thoughts from several places that the real crucifixion took place in Gethsemane. The Garden of Gethsemane was where Jesus made that tough decision to surrender himself to the cup. The cup was the chalice of death, the cup of God's wrath that Jesus would experience and endure. Jesus submitted to what he knew he had to do. Jesus crucified his own will, and the next 14 hours were the result of that decision. 35 years ago, James R. Edwards, a New Testament scholar and Presbyterian minister, wrote, "It is usually more difficult to decide to take a tough course than actually taking it." And I think that is so true in many areas of life. Think about the 12-step program of AA. The first step, the very first step, is the hardest because the first step, you have to admit to yourself that you are an alcoholic and you are powerless. Friend, if we take the account of Jesus' anguish in Gethsemane seriously, it is perhaps more difficult knowing that one has to die than actually facing the death itself. As you read the Gethsemane story, don't you get the impression that Jesus' decision to allow God's will was more difficult than actually going through it? Believe me, I'm not trying to minimize Calvary's pain in any way, but don't deny the pain, the torture, and the agony that Jesus endured in Gethsemane. So on this second Sunday in Lent, let's look at our Lord's experience there in the garden and see what it means for us today. The word Gethsemane in Hebrew means olive press. It's a device they use to extract oil from the olives. There is an olive grove at the Mount Olives, at the base, and across the Kidron Valley is the Temple Mount of Jerusalem. And I'm told from the city wall it is about a 15-minute walk from where the disciples probably ate their Last Supper. Was probably about a half-hour journey. To have stayed in that upper room would have been dangerous. With the authorities on watch for Jesus and with Judas bent on betrayal, the upper room could have been raided at any time. Jesus had another place to go. Friend, the fact that Judas knew where to look for Jesus shows us that Jesus was in the habit of going to that place in Gethsemane. When our Lord went to Gethsemane, there may have been two things that he may have deeply desired. One would have been fellowship with the Father, and two would have been fellowship with the disciples. In Genesis chapter 2, verse 18, it says, "It is not good for man to be alone," especially when they are in a crisis, in trouble, in sorrow. We need and we want people around us to encourage us and support us. Or maybe not say a word, just to be there with us. I think Jesus wanted that and needed that. It's a little strange that the friends who a short time before had been protesting that they would die for him could not stay awake with him for 1 hour. Jesus, we are told, left 8 of those at a short distance away from him as he took Peter, James, and John with him. He asked them to wait up and to pray. He's full of anguish. He's distressed because he knows what's coming quickly now. He knew that he would be crucified. He knew that one of his closest friends had already betrayed him and was on the way. He knew that those disciples would soon abandon him. He knew that he was the sacrificial Lamb of God and that it was time to be sacrificed. Luke's gospel says that as Jesus prayed there in the garden, that sweat poured off of him like great drops of blood. Friend, if you've ever doubted whether Jesus can sympathize with you in whatever kind of pain or distress or frustration that you are feeling, doubt it no more. But our text indicates to us, I think, some clear things about Jesus. Quickly, let me share 2 of them with you. One, Jesus did not want to die. Physically, he was around 33 years of age, and no one that I've ever met at 33 wanted to face their death. Some of the best years of our lives, when we're young. God created us to live, not to die. Death is not natural. Because of sin, death is real. It is a part of living, but not what the Creator originally intended. Jesus knew that the cross was ahead of him, that he would experience death in his body, and his body did not want that. 2, our text indicates that Jesus submitted himself to the will of God. He did not run away from the pain. He did not leave the experience or the cup that was right ahead of him. It would have been easy to ask, Lord, let's come up with another plan. I refuse to do this one. But he doesn't do that. Instead, he prays, not my will, but your will be done. Or depending on your translations, not what I want, but what you want. I love the story that Maxie Dunham. Maxie Dunham is now the current president at Asbury Theological Seminary. He tells about a preacher from years ago who was annoyed about an older gentleman in his congregation who fell asleep during his sermons. I'm looking. He noticed that there was a small boy who was sitting by that elderly gentleman, and so after the service, he went up to that little boy and said, "Son, who's the elderly gentleman you sit by?" And the little boy said, "Well, that's my grandfather." The preacher said to him, "Well, I'll tell you what, if you keep him awake during the sermon, I'll give you a dime each week." Well, that sounded like a good arrangement to this young man. So, for the next 2 Sundays during the sermon, that elderly gentleman was very attentive. But the third week came and he was sound asleep. The pastor, after the service, approached that boy and said, "What happened? Didn't you agree to keep him awake every week for a dime?" "Yes, sir," said the boy, "but now Grandpa gives me a quarter for not disturbing him." Can you feel how disappointed Jesus is in his close friends? Could you not stay awake for 1 hour? At his greatest need, they are somewhat insensitive, uncaring about their friend. But did you also see how understanding Jesus is of them when he says, "I know the spirit is willing, but the body is weak"? He knows what they have been going through, and he knows what they will face. It's interesting that 3 times he goes, he prays, he comes back, and he finds them sleeping. I wonder if there's any significance between those 3 times and the 3 times that he is tempted out in the wilderness. Because at the end of those temptations, Luke's gospel says this to us in chapter 4. When the devil had finished all this tempting, he left him until an opportune time. An opportune time. We don't really see it until he's there in the garden. This is now that opportune time to try to get him to stop, to not go to the cross, to give up, give in. And yet Jesus, as he had done in the wilderness, turned his face to the Father and said, "Not my will, but your will be done." You know, on a much smaller scale, isn't that the choice you and I have each day? Like Eric was talking about with that prayer. Every day, you and I are confronted with choices. Some are small, some are large. Each one of those choices asks us the question, God's will or my will? This past Wednesday night, we started our series on the way, and we had about 40 people out. I would invite you to come and join in, for we had some significant conversations that we'll share maybe in the future here at some point. The series has been led by Adam Hamilton. I read one time where Adam got an email one day that was critical of something that he had done. Immediately he replied with a short halfway apology, but with a little poke at that person at the end of it. Do you ever do that? You know, especially with the email, how easy it is, you know, type, 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 hit send, and bam, it's right in their face. That person sent Hamilton an email right back. that was a little bit more pointed and critical, a little more of a slap in the face. Adam said he sat there enjoying typing an abrasive reply to him. But before he sent it, he paused. He thought, how much damage will this cause if I send it? What will it take to try and repair the damage, if I can repair it at all? What is God's will for this conversation? So he deleted the text he had typed and wrote another, sincerely apologizing for the mistake he had made and the hurt he had caused. Adam expressed his love for that person and asked for that person's forgiveness. Choices every day that you and I have to do it God's way or our way. How important a prayer that we need to reflect on. You realize when we pray that prayer, it is so small in its consequences compared to our Lord's Prayer there in the garden. Chances are none of us will ever be asked to make a choice of faith that will cause our death by violence. But my friend, if you look at the history of the Christian movement, many have had to make that choice. Many have had to pray, Lord, your will, not mine. Judas knew where Jesus would be. Judas led a crowd armed with swords and clubs sent from those religious authorities. And as they came into that garden, Jesus said to his disciples, the hour has come. Look, the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer. Thank God he prayed, not my will, but your will be done. That he could go through the anguish that he experienced there that would lead to Calvary.